Oh, how come I can't see that? Good evening. Welcome to the April 24th, 2023 Rental Housing Committee meeting. For those joining us in person, please note that due to our hybrid environment, audio and video recordings can no longer be shared from the lectern. Requests to share an audio or video presentation during the Rental Housing Committee meeting should be directed to nvrent@mountainview.gov by 4:30 p.m. on the meeting date. Additionally, due to the hybrid environment, we will no longer have speakers lined up to speak on an item. Anyone wishing to address the committee in person will complete a green speaker card. Please indicate the name you would like to be called by address committee in person to complete a speaker card. Please indicate the name of you would like to be called by when it's your turn to speak and the item number on which you would wish to speak. Please complete one speaker card for each item which you wish to speak and turn in to city staff as soon as possible, but no later than the public comment section for item you wish to speak. Instructions for addressing the committee virtually can be found on the posted agenda. The meeting is called to order at 7:05 p.m. Now I will proceed with the roll call. Andrea?
Thank you, Vice Chair. We'll begin with roll call, starting with Vice Chair Rosas.
Here.
Committee Member Cox.
Here.
Committee Member Keating.
Here.
Committee Member Madison is not in attendance at this time. Committee Member Ma.
Here.
Committee Member Brown.
Here.
Thank you.
We will now move to agenda item 3, consent calendar. These items will be approved by one motion unless any member of the committee wishes to remove any item for discussion. The purpose of the consent calendar is for the committee to efficiently and quickly consider routine or administrative business items with one motion. Although the committee members may remove it, it is generally not intended for committee to have a lengthy, substantive discussion on consent calendar items. Public comment will occur after the discussion. We invite you to submit speaker card now if you would like to speak on this item during public comment. Would any members of the committee like to pull an item? Having seen none, now I invite the public comments in person. Public committee will be called to speak first. Public comments will be called to speak first. Andrea, any? Okay. Any members of the public wishing to provide a virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Andrea, can you check to see if any?
We have no online speakers.
Okay. I will now bring the item back to committee action. A motion to approve the consent calendar should include reading the item on the agenda, item 3.1 and 3.2. Committee Member Ma?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I make a motion to approve the Rental Housing Committee meeting minutes for January 31st, 2023 and March 27th, 2023, and make a motion to adopt a resolution to adhere to and follow all applicable rules and regulations in the City Council Code of Conduct and Personal Code of Conduct as updated on March 14th, 2023, and the Council Advisory Body's Handbook as revised on October 22nd, 2021.
I recognize committee member. I'm sorry, you had your button.
Oh, I was going to second, but,
I think we only needed one,
oh, you only need one?
We need a second.
so please, we need a second.
Okay, I second.
I'll go ahead with roll call. Starting with Vice Chair Rosas,
Aye.
Committee Member Cox,
Aye.
Committee Member Keating,
Aye.
Committee Member Ma,
Aye.
Committee Member Brown.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
So our communications. Okay. We will now open the meeting. Thank you. Open the meeting to communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this discussion. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public provide comments on a non-agenda items? Haven't seen none. If you would like to speak on this item in person, please submit. Okay. Any person of the public wishing to provide a virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen.
We do have a few speakers here, so I'll go ahead and start with Speaker Welter. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. I know this new rental housing commission group is going to be deliberating on the RUBS program in the next few months. And I understand that it was brought up from letters from renters indicating that their RUBS payments were fluctuating in a large amount. I have 2 properties in Mountain View, one 77 units, 125 units. During the stakeholder meetings, I provided information to city staff that showed the fluctuation on the 77 unit property was plus or minus $5 over a 10-month, 11-month period. The 120 unit complex was plus or minus $10. I understand that. I'm not saying that people didn't have fluctuating bills. I'm saying that in my case, it's not true. We don't have residents that pay for vacant unit utilities. That was also brought up. While you consider this topic and you read the city staff report, you should not be saying to yourselves, what can we do? Or saying as a group, what can we do? First, you should say, should we do anything? Is it appropriate to do anything? There may be a reason to police some, but to make a general rule regulation that impacts everybody is likely unnecessary. It's more rules and regulations that are pushing landlords out of providing housing in the city, and that doesn't benefit anybody. I, for one, it's just another tipping stone to get me out of Mountain View. We've been in Mountain View for 40 years providing housing, and it's just not worth the time and the effort and the energy to continue to do so. And you, as a rental housing committee group, have the ability to recognize that and not do anything, which is appropriate. People should pay for their utilities. It puts skin in the game for them. It promotes conservation. It's not considered rent. You're going to be talking about this all the time. It is not considered rent. It is a pass-through. It comes from the tenant straight to the utility company. The increases most of the time are due to the city of Mountain View increasing their utility bills themselves. So conflict of interest. And that's all my time, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll now call on Malia Pyers. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to say welcome to your new role, Guadalupe, and welcome to the new Rental Housing Commission members. And contrary to the previous speaker, I actually live in a unit where there are RUBS, and I have seen fluctuations between $150 to $250 a month. Even 1 month, I had over $300 in water alone. It took me 9 months to get a credit back after they investigated and was able to give me back a portion of what I was charged. So I'm for pressing forward and investigating the RUBS charges. I do also live in a BMR unit, and so in the code, it's considered a portion of rent. And so I'm all for the council or the committee continuing to look at RUBS. Thank you. And again, welcome to the new committee members and Guadalupe in your new role. Thank you.
There are no further speakers, and I will note that committee member Madison arrived at 7:11. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the public, for your comments. We will now move on to Agenda 7.1, Overview Rent Stabilization Program. We will begin with a presentation from staff. Public comment will occur after presentation items. We invite you to submit a card if you would like to speak on this item during public comment. Now we move to questions from committee member.
We'll begin with a presentation.
Thank you, Andrea.
Good evening, committee members. Thank you for your service and for joining our committee. We welcome you this evening. Thank you, Acting Chair Rosas. And this evening we will have a presentation from staff, item 7.1, which is an overview of the rent stabilization program. This is a informative overview and requires no action from the committee. So we're going to go ahead and start with a little background information. The first topic we're going to talk about is the 2 laws that our program implements at the direction of the RHC. The Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act is the first one that we're going to start with. So the effective date of the CSFRA is December 23rd, 2016. This is a voter-approved measure to stabilize the community by reducing housing turnover in certain rental units. And it does this in 3 ways, the 3 main goals of the CSFRA. The first one is by stabilizing rents. The second one is by providing eviction protections. And the third is to ensure a fair rate of return for property owners. Most apartments built before December 23rd, 2016 are covered in some way by the CSFRA. The bulk of them in our city are fully covered, which means that they were built before 1995, have 3 or more units on the property, and are not a government or subsidized rental unit. There are some exceptions to this, and there are some strange properties in Mountain View, but you don't need to know all of those details. We take care of that on our side. There are also partially covered units. These are the units that receive only eviction protections. They're built between 1995 and 2017. They have 3 or more units on the property, and again, they are not a government or subsidized rental unit. And just to clarify, fully covered units receive both rent stabilization and eviction protections. This is a breakdown of our covered units in the city. There are about 16,000 apartments, 13,500 of which are fully covered, and about 1,500 are partially covered, which means that 71% of all apartments in Mountain View are fully covered by the CSFRA. We are a unique jurisdiction in that we are a majority of renters that live in this city. 58% of people in this city rent their homes, as opposed to 42% of owner-occupied housing. And the next topic that we'll talk about briefly is the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. This is the other law that we implement. The effective date of the MHRSO is October 28th, 2021, and it is a city council ordinance enacted to stabilize the community, again, by reducing housing turnover in mobile homes. All mobile home parks in Mountain View are covered by this ordinance, and it does something similar. It functions in similar ways as to the CSFRA. It stabilizes mobile home space rents and mobile home rents. It provides eviction protections to mobile home tenants only, not to people who own their homes and do not rent their homes out. The state of California has a law that does that. And it ensures a fair rate of return for mobile home park owners and mobile home owners. There are 6 mobile home parks in the city with 1,130 mobile homes, and these are the 6 different parks that you see here. There are some key points of both of the laws that really spell out what the laws do. The first is that rent is specifically defined by both laws. Rent increases are limited. Properties must be livable, healthy, and safe. Housing services must be maintained. Evictions are restricted to 9 reasons or just causes. Tenant relocation assistance is required to be offered for some types of evictions. And property owners are entitled to earn a fair rate of return on their investment. So to implement these laws, we have the Rent Stabilization Program, of which you see 2 staff members here. My name is Patricia Black. I forgot to introduce myself. And this is Andrea Kennedy. So to implement the program, the Rental Housing Committee, you all, are a key part of it. You are an integral yet separate part of the city government. The first committee in the city to have powers and duties independent from the city council, the city manager, and the city attorney. You oversee the implementation of the CSFRA and the MHRSO, and you provide direction to the Rent Stabilization Program and other city staff, legal counsel, and professional services who all work together to implement this law. And in the CSFRA, it actually mentions your integrity and autonomy as a body in section 1709K. I'm not going to read this, but it is here for your reference. The Rent Stabilization Program works with tenants and landlords to achieve the 3 main goals of the CSFRA and the MHRSO. We answer questions related to the programs and tenant-landlord rights and responsibilities. We conduct community education and outreach efforts, including facilitating workshops and clinics and creating and distributing a wide variety of outreach materials. We administer and oversee the petition and hearing process for rent adjustments. We monitor just cause eviction noticing and other mandatory noticing. We implement the tenant relocation assistance ordinance on behalf of the City Council. We perform policy research for consideration by the Rental Housing Committee and the City Council, and we coordinate and prepare Rental Housing Committee agendas, minutes, and reports. While we are overseen by the Rental Housing Committee, the Rent Stabilization Program is a part of the City of Mountain View's Housing and Neighborhood Services Division of the Community Development Department. We have 7 full-time staff members with the assistance of 2 outside legal counsel and 2 third-party professional services agencies. And this is who implements this law for you all. The Rental Housing Committee establishes an annual budget for the Rent Stabilization Program based on expenses incurred during the prior fiscal year and staff projections of expenses for the upcoming fiscal year. The program is fully funded by 2 annually charged fees, the rental housing fee for the CSFRA and the space rent fee for the MHRSO. You can see the fees for the 2022-2023 fiscal year here on the presentation. So now we're going to dive a little bit into some of our program areas. The first one that we'll start with is allowed rent increases and rent adjustment petitions. Rent increases are limited by the annual general adjustment of rent, which we will be setting for the next year to date this evening. Each year, the RHC sets the AGA for existing tenancies of CSFRA and MHRSO covered units. The AGA is the annually allowed rent increase that may be implemented by property owners from September 1st through August 31st. And a landlord may apply the AGA to a tenancy when at least 12 months have passed since the last rent increase, the rental housing fees are paid, the property is registered with the rent stabilization program, the owner is otherwise in compliance with the provisions of the CSFRA and the MHRSO, and the tenant was served a written 30-day notice as required by state law. And you can see here an example of one of the required information sheets that all landlords are required to give to new tenants and at the start of a rent increase. This is actually a multi-page document. We provide it in English, Spanish, and Mandarin for our tenants. And we also have a petition process. The petition process allows for upward and downward adjustments of rent. The CSFRA and the MHRSO require the city to provide landlords and tenants of rent stabilized units a way to request upward or downward adjustments of rent through a petition process. Landlords and tenants requesting adjustment in rent do so by filing petitions with the city and entering into a formal process. This process includes the filing of forms and documentation, pre-hearing meetings and pre-hearing settlement conferences, if requested, hearings overseen and adjudicated by an outside independent hearing officer, and the issuing of a formal decision by that same hearing officer. The process also allows parties to file petitions to file appeals with the RHC should they dispute the outcome of the decision. Those appeals will come to you, and you will hear them and make decisions on them. There are multiple types of petitions. For downward adjustment of rent, tenants can file a petition related to unlawful rent, the failure to maintain a habitable premise, a decrease in services or maintenance, and undue hardship related to banked rent increases. Landlords are able to file petitions for upward adjustment of rent, and tenants are able to file specific ones as well. Property owners can file upward adjustment of rent petitions for M&OI, which is maintenance of net operating income, if they're unable to maintain their net operating income between two specific time periods. They can file for specified capital improvement petitions, and tenants can file petitions jointly with their landlords for new or additional housing services. There are also two other types of petitions, one related to compliance with petition decisions and one for the exemption of properties. The next program area that we'll focus on is noticing and compliance. Program staff monitor required noticing and just cause eviction submittals. Landlords are required to notice tenants in writing and file a copy of the notice with the city. Tenants are required to also notice landlords in writing and file a copy of additional occupants request if they are seeking to add additional people to their lease. And I mentioned it briefly here, but one of the things that we do as city staff to help inform the public of what's going on, why they're receiving these notices, is we send follow-up packets to tenants for both banked rent increases and for termination notices. And one of the things that we send out, you can see here, is in conjunction with a letter to the tenants, we send informational materials in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian. For the Housing and Eviction Help Center, which is one of the programs that we run, as well as a multi-step informational flyer that tells tenants what to do and what to expect in the event that they have received a termination notice. We also actively track fee payments and registration to ensure compliance with the law. We provide extensive outreach before fees and registration are due. including multiple letters and registration packets that differ based on the size of the property, as well as postcards and other reminder-based materials. We also provide multiple workshops to assist property owners in registering their property. Those are both done live and in person, as well as hybrid and online. Landlords and mobile home park owners and landlords of mobile homes are required to pay associated fees and register their units by February 1st of each year. Staff review and track the fee payments and registration on a case-by-case basis. This is extensive work. And then we provide outreach to property owners in effort to support compliance. If the property remains out of compliance, staff mail compliance letters to property owners and eventually to tenants. And this is an example of a postcard that went out. On the back, there was also the information provided in Mandarin and Spanish. And then the next program area is eviction prevention in the Housing and Eviction Help Center. So under the CSFRA, and for mobile homes, not just mobile home spaces, there are just cause eviction protections. There are 5 at-fault reasons and 4 no-fault reasons that are allowed in the city of Mountain View. And you can see them here. I'm not going to read them all. And if you are evicted for a no-fault eviction, you may be eligible for a relocation assistance and first right of return. And then for mobile home owners, as I mentioned earlier, the mobile home residency law provides eviction protections for that specific group of people. Our eviction prevention program does a multitude of things, and one of the areas that we focus on is the Housing and Eviction Help Center, which connects landlords and tenants in Mountain View with support services in effort to reduce evictions. While there, we assist tenants and landlords with learning about rent stabilization, applying for affordable housing, and connecting with rental assistance programs. We help them review eviction notices and the eviction process to help landlords and tenants understand the process as well as potential outcomes. We connect community members to legal resources and assistance on site. And we also provide information on other support services, including mediation, social services, affordable housing, unhoused resources, and more. We actually have multiple community organizations that come to the Housing and Eviction Help Center and provide immediate support. And this is the flyer of events for the past 6 months. On the first Thursday, we have our community partners. And on the second Thursday, we have a workshop. And you can see some of our attendees and staff members in this photo here. The next program area that we implement is on behalf of the City Council. Your staff implements the Tenant and Relocation Assistance Ordinance. This ordinance requires landlords to offer tenant relocation assistance for no-fault terminations if displaced households meet income eligibility requirements as outlined by the ordinance. They receive financial assistance and relocation support to help them move. And then another program area that we implement is the Mountain View Mediation Program with the assistance of Project Sentinel. We oversee the program, and it provides free and confidential support resolution services to the people of Mountain View, which helps people come together, aids in communication, and settles disputes outside of court. They have about a 90% efficacy rate when people decide to mediate together. It's a very effective program, and it's been around for almost 50 years. And then the final area that we'll focus on this evening is outreach. So program staff work closely with other community organizations to increase community awareness and understanding of the tenant protections in Mountain View. And we have 3 objectives. The first one is to develop consistent materials that clearly communicate tenant protections and programs and services. The second objective is to increase engagement to better inform the community. And the third objective is to improve program efficacy, efficiency, and compliance to increase transparency and foster trust. We go over this communications plan annually. The last one was adopted in November, and you're seeing the outcomes of that here. And this is our final slide of this staff presentation. Here are some of the events that we attend and host throughout the year. So wanted to end it on a little high, light, positive note. This concludes staff presentation, and we are now available for questions.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Now I move to questions from the committee members. Committee member Cox?
That's me. Okay, just three, I think, brief ones. What is a tenant buyout?
A tenant buyout provides an opportunity for property owners to offer tenants a buyout. So they can say to them, propose to them a monetary payment for them to leave their unit.
Okay, and are there any regulations on how much they can offer or anything like that? Or it's just a completely voluntary thing?
I believe it's voluntary. However, we provide information on what is offered for tenant relocation assistance when a tenant buyout occurs. So we have a form that's very specific because there are very specific rules as to how tenant buyouts are supposed to be implemented by the property owners. And there are very specific regulations for tenant rights within that regulation. So that form that we have, that property owners are required to give to tenants, does provide information on what people would receive if they were being relocated through the tenant relocation assistance ordinance.
Okay. And second short question is, it looks like the fees to maintain the mobile home ordinance are about 3 times that of the CSFRA. Why is that?
So there are quite a fewer spaces to cover the cost of that particular program.
All right. And the last one is, why is it that protections for evictions only goes up to units that were built before 2017?
So that is part of state law. Costa-Hawkins, which started in 1995, provides very specific language as to what type of units can be covered by rent stabilization ordinances and eviction protections, and it stops them at the implementation date of the law.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Committee member Keaton?
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about notification around banked rent increases, because there are 2 steps. There's one of the landlord not taking a rent increase and therefore banking it, and then there's the other step further down the timeline of the landlord choosing to increase their rent. I believe up to 10% is allowed by taking out of the bank the additional rent increase. So is there notification at both those actions?
The only time period at which property owners are required to notify tenants of the banked rent increase is when the banked rent increase is being used, and there's specific language that they have to use for that noticing. And the city provides a form that can be used for that.
Does the rental housing committee get notified when banked rent increases are used?
We do. Property owners are required to upload the notices into our system, the registry portal, and then we follow those notices up with an informational packet that has a letter and the tenant hardship petition form in the packet so that tenants can access that if they need to.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the committee members? Committee member Keaton?
Thank you. acting chair at Rosas. So tell me if this is, I think this will fit within this agenda item. For BMR units, does the CSFRA apply?
I can take that question. Hi, I'm Nazanin. I'm one of your special counsels. I work at Goldfarb and Littman. The BMR units are considered government subsidized units and are there or affordable housing that is subject to a deed restriction, and therefore the CSFRA does not apply.
Some Section 8 units do receive coverage from the CSFRA, but it does get a little bit complicated.
So do we have the situation where within one apartment building, most of the units are covered by the CSFRA, but some are BMR units and are not covered?
So from what I understand, there are some below market rate units that are covered by the CSFRA. If they are strictly affordable housing properties, those are exempt, but there are I think maybe only like 4 buildings or 4 where they are, but they're mostly just partially covered since they're newer units, and they're not fully covered. But we can also double check for you.
Any more questions from the committee members? Committee member Brown?
Who played Santa Claus?
Can you repeat that?
It was Anki's husband who was playing Santa Claus.
Aw.
And that is Alitzel, who is playing an elf. Yes. And I am not dressed up there.
Did you have the Christmas spirit?
No, I had another outreach meeting I had to go to.
Any more questions from the committee members? Member Keating?
There were 2 external agencies, the Project Sentinel and another one in the presentation. Could you remind me the other one and what they do?
Associated Right-of-Way Services, ARWS, provides assistance to help implement the Tenant Relocation Assistance Ordinance. So they provide support to the tenants who qualify for tenant relocation assistance, and they also do community outreach and follow up with staff on what's happening with those units.
And sorry to interrupt, but I want to qualify my last answer in that BMR units are subject to the just cause provisions of the CSFRA, but not the rent stabilization provisions. So I had previously said the CSFRA does not apply. That was too broad of a statement. The just cause provisions of the CSFRA do apply to BMR units.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the committee members? Committee member Madison?
Thank you. So my question goes to the staff reviewing and tracking the fee payments and registration on a case-by-case basis. You mentioned that it is quite a bit of an undertaking to review the items. Under what circumstances do you go through and review the items? And is there a special cadence or is there any triggers that you look for?
In our system, we have to review each property to ensure that they're paid and to ensure that they've registered. Right now, that process is a little bit antiquated. We're looking at hopefully being able to do the payments through the portal with the next fiscal year billing, which will be next January. Keeping our fingers crossed that that works out, because that will make staff work much less challenging. Right now, it's quite a bit of work. But it's also very successful. We've found good ways to do it, and we're continuously refining them as we go. This is our first year with the fines that are associated with late registration and late fee payment. And that is where the heavy lift is coming in right now. So the follow-up required for that is quite extensive. And we're hoping that after doing all of the outreach that we've done and the very pinpointed and focused and targeted mailings and phone calls, that people are now going to be more aware that they have to do this every year, and therefore next year it will be less of a lift. We have quite a few elderly property owners in this city, and so supporting them through the process is very important. And we're finding new and different methods to ensure that they're able to access the systems in ways that they can. So typically that means that they're coming to staff or they're mailing in their registration forms that we've sent them. Anytime that we see an opportunity to reach them in a better way, we're trying to utilize it. And again, since this is our first year, we're hoping that next year will be a little bit easier. However, as you'll see in the next presentation, our compliance is up significantly. So we are having success.
Any more questions? Okay. Since there are no more questions, any members of the public wishing to provide virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in your Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Andrea?
There are no hands at this time.
Next, we will go into committee deliberations and provide feedback. We will now move to agenda item 7.2, Rent Stabilization Program Quarterly Report. We will begin with a presentation from staff. Public comments will occur after the presentation item.
Thank you, Chair Rosas. This item 7.2, is an overview of the quarterly report. We're going to go into it a little bit more detailed than we will every quarter so that you have some background information. Most of the time, you will not receive a memo with this agenda item. It will just be a visual presentation from staff. However, we wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up before we move in. Also, this is the first time that we're presenting this as a quarterly report. It used to be provided monthly, and the previous committee requested that it be provided quarterly, which allows us to give you more information. So having this once every few months instead of every month means that we can give more detailed information than we had been providing in the past. So the purpose of this agenda item is for the RHC to receive an overview of the Rent Stabilization Program's quarterly report and provide feedback. A little bit of background on this agenda item. In December of 2017, staff presented a draft monthly status report summarizing information and providing details on key data points related to market trends and program activities. The Rental Housing Committee provided feedback and staff updated the report to reflect the RHC's direction. Since that time, we have updated the content and formatting of the report based on RHC feedback and programmatic changes, including the addition of a separate focused report on the eviction prevention program. That report is now included in this report. At the November 2022 RHC meeting, staff presented the communications plan for fiscal year 2022-2023. That communications plan suggested updates to the report as follows. We altered the report from a monthly reporting period to quarterly reporting period, and we added additional data points, including registration and fee compliance data, average market rent and vacancy rates per unit for fully covered units based on unit size, annual termination data for CSFRA covered units since the start of the CSFRA, and a quarterly look back at the current year, mobile home data, including petitions, housing and eviction help center data, and public inquiries over time. This is an infographic-rich, data-driven report which highlights elements of our programs, provides demographic information for the housing and eviction help center attendees, and reviews relevant market data. It's organized into 7 sections: community outreach and education, CSFRA properties and compliance, rent adjustment petitions, eviction prevention, tenant relocation assistance, property sales, and market conditions. It compiles data from CoStar databases, which is an outside database that we have access to. And this is, the data gathered from this database is in as regimented and consistent search terms as possible every month to adhere to the specifics of the CSFRA. This data is not available for MHRSO covered units. We also utilize extensive internal record keeping and databases. We also receive data from partnerships with our external consultants and vendors, and we pull data from the Rent Stabilization Program portal and registration system, which we'll be able to use more thoroughly as more properties are registered. This is an overview of the report. You have this in your presentation there in your packet. And you can see here the first 2 pages front and back, and then the second 2 pages front and back. The first section is community outreach and education. As we mentioned before, and this is why we ended on outreach in the last presentation, we do a lot of work around outreach and education. It is the heart of the program because everything that we do is focused on this. Every letter that goes out, every form that we make, we're constantly trying to come up with better ways to communicate the complexities of these laws in ways that both landlords, tenants, and outside community members can understand. So you see here a breakdown of each section for this particular section, which includes information requests and inquiries, community outreach, and education and information. Here you see the overview of information requests and inquiries. So far this fiscal year, we've received 2,303 inquiries from the public, with the bulk of those being through emails and phone calls. We've also had 20% of those inquiries be Spanish speaking, and the primary topic right now, as of when this report was run, is property registration. So you can really see our focus there to ensure we're getting information out to people so that they're not receiving fines if they're not aware of what's going on. And then you'll see here there's also the other topic. We're working on breaking that topic down. We will revise these for the next fiscal year to include affordable housing and BMR as a topic area, as well as joint petitions. The next section is community outreach. So far this fiscal year, we've held 26 workshops for a total of 116 participants. 12 of those have been bilingual. And they are most of the time held virtually and in person, so they're hybrid. And they're at the Eviction and Housing Help Center, or the Housing and Eviction Help Center, excuse me. We also hold workshops off-site. We have one coming up at the Senior Center at the end of April. We've held 2 on-site at 2 different mobile home parks. The third one is coming up in May, excuse me. That month is sneaking up on me. And we also have held a few other ones in different locations. We've held 39 office hours. These happen every week on Tuesdays from 10 to noon. We have bilingual staff here, and this one is mostly attended by property owners. And we've attended 48 outreach events so far this year. We've reached almost 2,000 community members through this outreach. And then the last section here is our educational efforts. So you can see here we maintain 42 website pages. We have 8 informational documents that we update and maintain in multiple languages. There are 31 fillable forms that your staff updates and creates. And we've posted 32 Mountain View Voice ads related to a variety of different topics, including the RUBS community meetings that we held, the registration, and our workshops, as well as the Housing and Eviction Help Center. For mailings, you can see we've really upped this area of focus. We send out postcards and flyers pretty regularly. They're very effective. And we do a newsletter biannually. The next one's going to come out toward the end of June. That goes out to all tenants. We also provide one that is specific for all property owners, as well as one that is specific for mobile home owners and one that's specific for mobile home park owners. And those are mailed in English, but also available in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And then we send out those targeted mailings that I mentioned. So a lot of these have to do with property registration and fees, as well as those tenant letter packets that I mentioned, which includes for compliance. If landlords remain out of compliance with the law, we will send tenants letters that their property owner is out of compliance. And then we also send regular email updates. We have about 1,100 subscribers, and we've sent out 17 committee updates, 28 workshop updates, and 11 general community updates. The second section of this quarterly report is focused on the CSFRA properties, and please forgive us, we will be adding in the mobile home parks as well. You can see here how many fully covered properties we have, the number of units that represents, the number of partially covered properties, the number of units that represents. I think we're missing a couple of properties on this unit count. We'll have to double check our data here. We have, of our fully covered units, as of this report, the numbers have since changed. 63% of our properties are registered and 87% have paid their fees. So again, this is about a month delayed in data reporting, and we have quite a few more properties that are in compliance now. The third section is focused on rent adjustment petitions. You can see here petitions received over time for each fiscal year, and then the breakdown of the current fiscal year. So far this year, we've received 42 tenant petitions, the bulk of which are related to unlawful rent. This is likely due to the concessions issue that was decided by the RHC last fall. And we are ticking through our petitions. The statuses are going more toward decided at this point. So again, this is updated every month on our end and tracked monthly as well. And then you'll see here down below gives you a little bit of information about the Mountain View Mediation Program, which greatly supports our program. There have been 100 mediation and conciliations through that program. So far, 71 of those 100 are resolved and 28 are pending. One was unresolved. It's very successful, as I mentioned earlier. The next section is related to our eviction prevention program. This is data from our Housing and Eviction Help Center. We've held 18 clinics at the Mountain View Public Library on the first and third Thursday of the month so far. We've been able to assist 214 community members. This came out directly of the need that community members had to apply for COVID rent assistance and has continued as an important and valuable resource to the community. Most people heard of the services through word of mouth and the termination notice packets that we send. And the bulk of attendees come to apply for rent assistance and meet with one of our community partners, the Community Services Agency of Mountain View and Los Altos. And they also come to receive legal help, which they receive for free from the Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto. And you can see here that 73% of our attendees who come to the Housing and Eviction Help Center speak Spanish. 55% of them heard about us through the community, through word of mouth. The majority, 71%, have 3 or more people living in their household, and the majority, 68%, live on an average annual household income of less than $35,000 a year. The next section for eviction prevention focuses on required noticing. We've received 284 banked rent increase notices, 825 termination notices, 0 tenant buyouts, and 0 additional occupant notices. And you can see here, as requested by the Rental Housing Committee, the no-fault evictions over time since the start of the program, as well as the at-fault evictions over time since the start of the program. And then down below, we specifically show the failure to pay rent notices over time, as well as the failure to pay rent notices for the current fiscal year. Well, this is a rolling, I should say, this is a rolling quarterly snapshot. So this will change as we change quarters throughout the year. These are the unique households that have received failure to pay rent notices. So there's a difference between those two numbers. 789 failure to pay rent notices have been received by tenants. However, those are only for 447 households. So that means that there are households that are receiving more than one termination notice for failure to pay rent over multiple months. And then we have tenant relocation assistance as Section 5. You can see here what's happened in that arena over the course of the past few years, starting in 2018. This is reported on calendar year, so please note that. That's how we receive the data from our community organization that works with us. And there was a state law that went into effect in 2020 called SB 330 that significantly halted any kind of redevelopment, which is why you see the numbers dropping as they have. The next section is related to property sales. So this is a highlight of properties sold over time since 2011, yes. And you can see that we're right around average for the past few years for the number of properties sold, but the number of units remain well below average. So again, in Mountain View, we have a bulk of properties that are 5 or less units. So what you're seeing here is smaller properties transacting, not larger properties. And as of March 31st, 3 properties were for sale for a total of 24 units. The final section is Section 7, which is related to market conditions. The data is pulled from a service called CoStar. Again, mobile home data is not available. And as registration compliance increases, data from the rent stabilization portal will be used as a comparator. The first section is average market rent. The larger graph that you see there is the average market rent for all unit types, newly built, partially covered, all units in yellow, and fully covered units in green. So this is all unit sizes, all unit types that you're seeing here for the past 10 fiscal years. The smaller green graph is specifically highlighting the market rent fluctuations for fully covered units. And that dip that you see there is related to COVID. And then the last graph that you see is market rent by the number of bedrooms for fully covered units. We cannot go above 3 bedrooms. The system's not reliable above that. The next section is vacancy rates, and it follows a similar pattern. So you see, oh my gosh, I apologize. This is not vacancy rates. This is market rent again. Please refer to your staff report and attachment for that. For the vacancy rates, I have that data. Give me 1 second. I will read it to you. So for newly built units, the current vacancy rate is 25.5%. For all units, it's 9.4%. For fully covered units, right now it's 5.4%. And for partially covered units, it's 4%. And I do want to note that CoStar data should not be used to discuss the suspension of the CSFRA. It is not reliable in that way. For fully covered units, as I mentioned, the vacancy rate is 5.4%. And the original vacancy rate way back in Q4 of 2016-2017 was 4.5%. We saw a significant increase during COVID, and the market has recovered mostly. And then for the studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, there's also vacancy rate data there. And this concludes staff's presentation on the quarterly report. We will now take questions.
Now we will move to questions from committee members. And I believe Committee Member Cox has a question.
Yes. So I'm trying to get my head around the 25% vacancy rate on the new units. I guess the first thing is, how new is a new unit? And, you know, do you find that, is that unusual? Because we have a lot of construction going on in Mountain View right now, and owners want to like sort of gradually bring their units on the market, or can you offer any explanation for that high number?
So when markets come online, they actually get into the system even before apartments are available for rent. So that data point is not, I would say, not reliable and fluctuates greatly when new units are built and come online. We do have units come online quite frequently in Mountain View. So it is something to take kind of with a grain of salt, because basically, typically when a building finally does become occupied, a new building comes online. The data changes again. We can pull the data specifically for each building, but since these are not covered units, that exercise might be one to consider, but perhaps not implement.
So, but how new is new when you say newly built?
Newly built is anything built after 2017 that is not covered by the law.
Okay. All right. And then just one more question here. I'm trying to get my head around the term average market rent. Is that actual rent paid, or is that just what they're asking a new tenant when he comes in?
It is what is being asked. So average market rent is average asking rent without concessions.
Okay.
The only way that we can pull what is actually being paid is through our portal, our own rent stabilization program portal. And that will only show for fully covered units. And that data will only be reliable once we have higher compliance within the system.
Okay. So we won't get, I mean, there's no way to get out of this data information on the market rate units, really what people are paying, right?
Only through the portal for fully covered units once we have that compliance.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
I believe Committee Member Ma has a question.
Yes, I have a question on the eviction prevention one. So for failure to pay rent notices, is that a 3-day notice for eviction, or is that something different?
It's a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit.
Okay.
Yes.
And for the rent adjustment petition, for the status of a petition, is settled the final state, or is decided the final state for most of them?
So you can either have a settled petition, which means that it went to a settlement conference or was settled before a hearing occurred through our formal processes, or it goes to a hearing. And then it's decided through the hearing process.
So either of them, there could be a terminus of the process. It's
That's
just
correct.
some go further than that. Okay. And for the CSFRA property registration number, is there a different tactic staff does for smaller landlords out of compliance versus larger ones, or are they similar processes?
So right from the beginning, we had different processes for these smaller property owners, and we're also going to update this next fiscal year as well with another concept. For these smaller property owners, we actually sent out the registration form to be filled out by hand with a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope for them to return them back to us. Other jurisdictions have had success for people who may not be as tech savvy or capable of using the online systems. And we have had success with that. And next fiscal year, we will be targeting additional properties that were purchased before a certain date. So we can tell how long a property owner has held onto their property. And based on that, we will also be sending out those mail-based registration systems to those properties. We have also, as much as possible, followed up in any way that we can with the communication and contact information that we have for the property owners of smaller properties. So if we have a phone number, we're using it. If we have an email, we're using it. We're trying to hunt down and find the contact information for those property owners.
And for community outreach, if a person wants to reach your office outside of the hours of 45 or 10 to 12, is there an availability for that, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So we have, anyone can walk into our office at any time from 9 to 5. We're located at 298 Escuela, right in the heart of all of the bulk of the apartments in the city. And we have an open door policy with that, unless we happen to all be out to lunch at the same time, which very rarely happens. We almost always have a staff member who speaks Spanish on site and can provide assistance. We also have office hours from 10 to 12 every Tuesday. And again, we have the Housing and Eviction Help Center, and we have an email that is responded to within 24 hours and a phone line that's responded to within 24 hours.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Any more questions from the committee members? I believe Committee Member Brown has a question.
I do. I have a two-part question. So 42 website pages seems like a lot. Is there a flow chart or some other way to find which of those 42 has information that some resident of the city or property owner is looking for?
We're working on refining the website right now. One of those pieces of information why that's so high is because we also provide websites in multiple languages. So for example, our mediation program, we have 3 pages that we maintain, one in English, one in Spanish, and one in Chinese. We also, for the Housing and Eviction Help Center, maintain one in English, one in Spanish, one in Chinese. So that's one of the reasons why that count is high. We are trying to make sure that we can reach our most vulnerable communities as efficiently as possible.
So what would be the fastest way, starting from a blank browser, to get to this report?
You would go to mountainview.gov/RSP and click on outreach. A little bar will come down, and then you'll see information and materials. You click there.
Thank you.
I believe, I'm sorry, I didn't see who raised hands. Okay, so I will, please, Committee Member Keaton, ask your question.
So as you cover the range of all the programs you're supporting and, which are covering the CSFRA and the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and probably some things that are neither of those. Can you give us just a sense of how the cost of running your staff is allocated?
That will be gone over in the budget discussion next month.
I can wait for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, committee member.
I think now Member Cox has a question.
Yeah, I just had one follow-up question. In other things that I've done with the city, there was one property in the downtown, I'm not going to mention which one, where, I mean, it had been vacant for a really long time. And, you know, when we made some inquiries into city staff about it, we found out, they said, well, you know, that person's property tax is on auto pay with the county, and we have no other way of contacting them to, you know, to talk to them about why it's been so many years that they've never rented their place out. And, you know, I know that you're trying to ramp up this whole thing about registering the units, but to me, it seems like, you know, paying the annual fee should be what my old college professor used to call a lead pipe cinch. It should be easy and obvious to anyone, and I wonder if the reason it's not at 100% is because there are some people that you can't get a hold of.
There are some people that we can't get a hold of. However, I would like to note that our fee compliance is very high compared to other jurisdictions. And right now, as of today, our fee compliance is at 90%.
Okay.
And for mobile home parks, it's at 100%.
Any more questions from the committee members?
And to answer committee member Keating's question, 6 of our staff members are paid through the CSFRA budget, and 1 staff member is paid through the MHRSO budget, if that helps at all, before we enter budget discussions next month.
I look forward to more questions.
Seeing no more questions, I now invite the members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to provide virtual comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen.
We'll go ahead and ask Malia Pyers to unmute.
Hi, good evening. So I just wanted to say thank you, city staff, for the wonderful work that you're doing. I look forward to studying the report presented today in greater detail. I do have just some comments or questions. I noticed you mentioned the high vacancy rates. Do you know how many BMR units there are? Are they included in that vacancy rate? And then wondering how many people are registered in the BMR program. I noticed that there were several vacancies, and I'm just wondering why there would be vacancies for this amazing program. Is it because the rents are still high and unattainable for low-income families? And is there anybody looking at adjusting the qualifying AMI as an entry point for BMR? Thank you. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions.
So I'm just wondering if staff has any comments, or if that's, because that would be of interest to hear more and about BMRs and how that does or doesn't interact with your office.
So the City of Mountain View also has a housing division, which is the other half of our team that is not covered by the Rental Housing Committee in the Community Development Department. The Housing Division oversees BMR and affordable housing for the city and sets the program for those units. As far as vacancy rates go, those are included in the CoStar data. We don't differentiate or delineate from them, as they are not part of our program. And that is the details that I have on that.
Now, a question for staff. Do we have deliberations?
Staff can provide feedback on this report if there are any additional areas of interest that you would like us to consider. Any questions from the committee members?
We will now move to agenda item 7.3, draft resolutions, attendees in Chapter 3, rules of conduct. We will begin with the presentation from staff. Public comments will occur after the presentation items.
Thank you. I'll be doing the presentation on 7.3. So the purpose of this item is to review and adopt amendments to CSFRA Regulations Chapter 3, Code of Conduct, to bring into conformance with the Mountain View City Council amendments to the City Council Code of Conduct, and to clarify the process for establishing an agenda for rental housing committee meetings. Next slide, please. Thank you. As background, the CSFRA authorizes the Rental Housing Committee to establish rules and regulations for the administration and enforcement of the CSFRA. In addition, the CSFRA authorizes the Rental Housing Committee to perform any other duties necessary to administer and enforce the CSFRA. And finally, the CSFRA authorizes the Rental Housing Committee to issue and follow such rules and regulations as will further the purposes of the CSFRA. So the first amendment, proposed amendment to CSFRA Regulations Chapter 3 would bring into conformance the Rental Housing Committee's Code of Conduct with the recent changes that were made by the City Council to their Code of Conduct. Previously, the City Council used or relied on Robert's Rules of Order, and they recently changed that, updated their Code of Conduct to refer to Rosenberg's Rules of Order for reference and or guidance in the process or procedure for conducting rental housing committee meetings. The proposed amendments would update section B1 of Chapter 3 to provide that the Rental Housing Committee will also follow Rosenberg's Rules of Order rather than Robert's Rules of Order. The second amendment proposed amendment to Chapter 3 would clarify the procedures for agendizing items for consideration by the Rental Housing Committee. The proposed amendment provides that the Rent Stabilization Program Manager, in consultation with the chair of the committee, shall generally be responsible for placing items on the agenda and the timing for those items or consideration of those items. That is basically what happens right now. However, it also clarifies that upon request by a rental housing committee member, a decision will be made as to whether to agendize that item for the next meeting or a later date. If the item cannot be agendized for the next meeting, if it requires greater lead time for staff to prepare, or there's simply not enough time on the next agenda, then the request to agendize the item will be placed on the agenda for the next meeting to ask the Rental Housing Committee where you would like it to fit in on a future agenda. So the recommendation by staff is to review and adopt both amendments to CSFRA Regulations Chapter 3, Code of Conduct, to bring into conformance with the Mountain View City Council amendments to the City Council Code of Conduct, and to clarify the process for establishing an agenda for Rental Housing Committee meetings. And I'm happy to take any questions.
So now we will move to questions from the committee members. The chair recognizes Committee Member Keaton.
Thank you. So today we received answers to RHC committee member questions. And if I was a member of the public, would I ever get to see those Q&A?
To clarify, do you mean would the public ever get a response to those questions?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the city council, if I go to Legistar, I get to see the council questions. And I'm just wondering if there's anything comparable that lets the public see these committee questions.
So far, that has not been the practice. Typically, what happens is that the committee members will repeat their questions at the meeting, and they will be answered by staff.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee members?
If I could just add, Committee Member Keating, it's possible for us to do that. We can if that's the direction that the Rental Housing Committee would like for us to do.
Good to know, and I'm not making any request at this time.
I don't see any further questions. I stand corrected. The chair recognizes Committee Member Brown.
So to get that process done, would I have to request of the chair to consult with the program manager to put that as an item on a future agenda? Or can I just ask nicely?
You haven't yet adopted these changes. But yes, if you choose to make these changes tonight and you would like to make that request, then you would do so by making a written request to the program manager for that to be agendized either for the next meeting or, if not possible, for the request to be agendized for the next meeting.
Seems like this is a nice, well-outlined procedure. Thank you.
Since I don't see any more raised hands, I now invite the members of the public. Okay, members of the public. Any members of the public wishing to provide virtual comments on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen.
I'll go ahead and ask Teresa McFarland to unmute.
Hello, committee members, and welcome. I just wanted to request, it's not precisely on this point, but is there any way that the agenda and the agenda items can be made available before the Thursday preceding the Monday meeting? Because often, as you can see, the staff reports are pretty beefy and there is a lot to cover. And, a lot of times we don't get those until Thursday afternoon for a Monday meeting. Thank you.
There are no additional speakers.
Next, we will go to committee deliberations and provide feedback. The chair recognizes Committee Member Cox.
I don't have anything to say, but I can move the staff recommendation if nobody else does.
I recognize committee member, the chair recognizes Committee Member Madison.
Thank you. I would like to second that.
All right, we'll move ahead with roll call. We'll start with Acting Chair Rosas.
Aye.
Committee Member Cox.
Aye.
Committee Member Keating.
Aye.
Committee Member Madison.
Aye.
And Committee Member Ma.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
So just through the chair, for future reference, if you could actually state out your full motion, that's required. So, yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So now we now move to agenda item 7.4, annual general adjustment for rent 2023. We will begin with presentation from staff. Public comment will occur after the presentation.
Before we begin this agenda item, should we redo that vote?
To be safe, yes.
Okay. If you want, I'll read the staff recommendation then. It is to adopt amendments to the CSFRA Regulations, Chapter 3, Code of Conduct, to bring in conformance with Mountain View City Council amendments to City Council Code of Conduct and clarify process for establishing agenda for rental housing committee meetings.
The chair should ask for a second now.
And second, please. Oh, the chair will ask.
Does anybody second that motion?
I second.
Now I'll go ahead with roll call. We'll begin with Acting Chair Rosas,
Aye.
Committee Member Cox,
Aye.
Committee Member Keating,
Aye.
Committee Member Madison,
Aye.
Committee Member Ma.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All righty, thank you so much. Okay, so we will now move to agenda item 7.4, Annual General Adjustments of Rent 2023. We will begin with a presentation from staff. Public comment will occur after the presentation.
Thank you, Acting Chair Rosas and committee members. This evening, agenda item 7.4 is a discussion and adoption of the annual adjustment of rent. The purpose of this agenda item is to establish the allowed percentage of the annual general adjustment of rent under the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act and the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance for fiscal year 2023-24 of 5%. Section 1707 of the CSFRA and Section 46.6 of the MHRSO state that no later than June 30th of each year, the RHC shall announce the amount of the annual general adjustment of rent, which shall be effective as of September 1st of that year. The annual general adjustment of rent is the percentage by which the rent for existing tenancies in covered rental units may be increased each year. It can be increased once per 12 months, and it is capped with a price floor of 2% and a ceiling of 5%, which means that it can never go below 2% and can never go above 5%. To calculate the annual general adjustment of rent, we use 100% of the consumer price index of all items for a 12-month period ending in March. That is what the CSFRA says. However, ending in March does not actually exist. It either ends in February or it ends in April. And because of that, the RHC adopted regulations to revise that March date to February when the index actually does exist. We utilize the San Francisco Oakland Hayward CPIU index, which was revised to the San Francisco area index a few years ago because the other one became defunct. Again, the RHC chose to use the February index, which is released in March. For this year, the percentage for the CPIU was calculated to 5.3%. Because of that ceiling in the percentage, that means that the AGA for the next year is 5%. This is as required by the CSFRA and the MHRSO. The AGA is effective from September 1st, 2023 onward. A 30-day notice of rent increase is required per state law. To give the increase, property must be in compliance with the CSFRA or the MHRSO, and the required information sheet that I showed you all earlier must be given with the rent increase. And recommendation from staff is to adopt a resolution announcing the annual general adjustment of rent under the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act and the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance for 2023-2024 of 5% to be read in title only, further reading waived. And that concludes staff presentation. Are there any questions from the committee?
We now move to questions from the committee. The chair recognizes committee member Keaton.
Thank you. Could you display the actual resolution for us? No, I wanted to see the draft resolution to adopt, attachment 1.
I do not have the ability to share that at this time.
So it's available on the city website, but if I didn't bring my computer, I'd have to open up my computer to read it. And
We have the binder. I can go grab the binder for you.
Yeah, I'd like that actually, if you don't, sorry, but no, it's just, oh.
Nope.
Generally, don't you have the ability to pull up browser and display things?
Yes.
I'm going to come more prepared next time. So this doesn't say 5, where does it say 5%?
This is the wrong resolution.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. I appreciate being provided with a copy of the actual resolution that I could look at here since it's been a few days, and I have no further comments.
Any more questions from the committee members?
May I move adoption?
No, not yet.
Oh, no, not yet? Oh,
Public comment.
Since there are no more questions, I now invite the public. Any members of the public wishing to provide virtual comments on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen.
There are no public comment at this time.
Next, we will go into committee deliberations and provide feedback. The chair recognizes committee member Madison.
Thank you. So just in looking at the percentage, I know that we are capped between 2 and 5%. I would just like to bring to the committee's attention that given the current numbers that we have quite a majority of households that earn a gross income under $35,000, that 5% may be a little high for some units, families within units, particularly senior citizens. So I would be curious to know if there's any way to consider something just under 5%, so that way we have some wiggle room and we're not just outright charging the maximum.
The CSFRA actually sets the annual general adjustment at what the index indicates. So if it's above 5% or below 2%, it either bumps up to 2% or drops down to 5%, but it is set by that index.
Any further questions or deliberations or comments from the committee members? The chair recognizes committee member Ma.
I make a motion to adopt a resolution of the Rental Housing Committee announcing an annual general adjustment of rent under the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act and Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance for 2023 to 2024 of 5%.
I second. Oh, sorry.
Any other committee member wishes to second that motion?
I second the motion.
All right, I'll go ahead with the roll call. I'll begin with Acting Chair Rosas,
Aye.
Committee Member Cox,
Aye.
Committee Member Keating,
Aye.
Committee Member Madison.
I, notwithstanding my earlier comments, thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Ma.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Yay, we're coming to the part I wanted. Okay, so we will now move to agenda item 7.5, election of a chairperson and a vice chairperson. We will begin with a presentation from staff. Public comment will occur after the presentation.
Thank you. The purpose of this agenda item is to nominate and elect one member of the Rental Housing Committee to serve as chairperson and one member as vice chairperson for an annual term from May 2023 until the end of April 2024. Thank you. The CSFRA provides that annually, the committee shall elect one of its members to serve as chairperson. The first order of business for the Rental Housing Committee is to elect a chairperson. And CSFRA Regulation Chapter 3 describes the roles and responsibility of the chair and the vice chair in more detail. And it says that the chair presides at all of the Rental Housing Committee meetings, signs written resolutions of the Rental Housing Committee, and meets with staff to set the agenda for the meetings. In the event of and during the absence or disability of the chair, the vice chairperson shall perform all duties of the chair and preside as chair for the Rental Housing Committee meetings. So for some background, the chair and vice chair are elected on an annual basis in April of each year. The term for chair and vice chair run from May of each year until the end of April for the following year. In January 2023, Committee Member Allman was elected as chairperson and Committee Member Rosas as vice chairperson until May 2023 due to the untimely vacancies of those positions. So the staff recommendation is to nominate and elect one member of the committee to serve as chairperson and one person to serve as vice chairperson for an annual term of May 2023 until the end of April 2024. And that concludes staff presentation. Any questions?
Now we move to questions from the committee members. The chair recognizes committee member Keating.
I wonder if the committee would be interested to have every committee member indicate whether they are neutral or interested in being chair or vice chair. Well, I'm asking, no, I guess it's discussion. Oh, okay. I'm sorry to be jumping ahead. Oh, I don't have a question.
Since I see no more questions or comments from the committee members, I invite public comment. Seeing no persons in the public, any members of the public virtually wishing to provide virtual comments on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display the countdown timer on the screen.
Thank you. I do not see any public comment on the line.
Now we move on to committee deliberations and provide feedback. I recognize committee member Keaton.
So I guess I'll just state my preferences, and I hope others will choose to state their preferences too before we move to motions and so on. I am neutral about holding either office and would be happy to wait to hold an office, but I also would not mind. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? So I recognize, the chair recognizes committee member Cox.
Yes, I would also be willing to serve in either position, but I'm also willing to let somebody else do it too.
The chair recognizes Alex Brown.
That's me. I don't know if I'm eligible for either, but I'd be happy to. I would just like to say that you're doing a great job.
Any more questions or comments from the committee members? I recognize, the chair recognizes committee member Ma.
I nominate Guadalupe Rosas to be chair of the RHC as part of the informal tradition that vice chair becomes chair.
Wait, don't I?
You can recognize me. I won't talk unless you do. I was going to second it, provided that you want the job.
So I want to thank committee member Ma for his nomination. At this time, I would decline, although I would accept a vice chair. The chair recognizes committee member Madison.
Thank you very much. So seeing that if there is anyone else who is interested in running, I am happy to express interest in the chair position, and I am indeed also happy to wait as well.
So I would like to nominate Edie Keaton for chair and myself for vice chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and begin with a roll call vote. Oh, yeah, sure. No, you can, you can.
I accept the nomination.
I'd like to ask a question to legal counsel.
Yes.
Should we do these as individual motions and nominations?
It can be one motion for both.
So I have I think an expectation of the vice chair is that they will then become the chair. And is that something that you would be interested in a year, Guadalupe, or not?
So I do believe that I need a little more practice in being the chair, and I think that being vice chair will definitely allow me to do that. I do want to serve my community in the best possible way. And I do recognize that at this time I am not ready to be a chair, but I would like to be the vice chair because in that way it'll allow me to practice.
And then you would be interested in being the chair, presumably.
I believe I could, even if I am the vice chair and next year I do get elected as the vice chair, I can also decline being the chair.
Thank you for your comments.
Seeing no more comments or questions,
We'll go to a vote. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, can we state it as a motion, please? It's right now just a nomination discussion on the floor. So whoever wants to make that motion can.
the chair recognizes committee member Madison.
Thank you. I motion to nominate and elect Committee Member Keating as chair of the Rental Housing Committee and current Vice Chair Rosas as the continuing Vice Chair of the Rental Housing Committee.
Do we need a second?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll go ahead with roll call vote, if that's okay. All right, we'll begin with Acting Chair Rosas,
Aye.
Committee Member Cox,
Aye.
Committee Member Keating,
Aye.
Committee Member Madison,
Aye.
Committee Member Ma.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, committee members and staff. We will now move to committee staff announcements and updates. I will hand it over back to staff presentation.
Thank you, committee. I'll begin with agenda item 8, going over upcoming monthly workshops, clinics, and office hours. All right, so I'd like to start by looking at the Housing and Eviction Help Center. Patricia did talk about this in some depth today already, but generally it's for the community to learn about various housing programs in Mountain View. Again, some of our biggest topics are people receiving rent assistance, assistance with applying for affordable housing, and connecting with other local agencies in the city. We definitely also focus on eviction help, and so we provide assistance to both tenants and landlords, tenants who have received termination notices or have questions about evictions, and landlords who are looking to maybe serve those notices and follow the CSFRA. We also have legal resources, so we do have on-site virtual legal services from the organization CLUSPA, Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto, who attends every Housing and Eviction Help Center and will have one-on-one meetups with tenants regarding the termination notices or the unlawful detainer documentation they received. And again, we connect with a lot of the organizations in Mountain View to talk about all things. So a lot of times people will come with needing help with food distribution, or maybe first or last month's deposit for getting a new house, mediation services, and other homelessness prevention type services. So we get people connected with those resources as well. The Housing and Eviction Help Center is the first and third Thursday in the Mountain View Public Library. We're on the second floor program room, and we're there from 1 to 5. If people are not able to make it in person, they can join virtually on Zoom at mountainview.gov/eviction help clinics. All right, so we also have virtual office hours, as Patricia mentioned earlier, where we do have only the option to join virtually. And again, this is very useful for a lot of our landlords who predominantly join during the virtual office hours. And so the link to our office hours is on the screen, mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. Those are every Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. We also have upcoming workshops listed here. So the next workshop is actually going to be our rent stabilization and eviction prevention basic workshop that we were mentioning is going to be held in person at the Senior Center. This is this Thursday coming up at 1 o'clock. And of course, we are targeting our senior community, but it is open to the public and anyone can join. And then next month on May 18th at 4 p.m. at the Housing and Eviction Help Center, we're reserving the last hour from 4 to 5 to talk about tenant protections and eviction. So this one will be focused on tenants, and then the following month we'll have one focused towards our landlords. This will be hybrid and bilingual, so you can join in person or on Zoom. Again, the link is there on the screen, mountainview.gov/RSP webinars. And then also, we just finally would like to finish up highlighting some of the outreach that our team's outreach specialist does, who is fluent in English and Spanish. So she joins Castro Mistral for food distribution or diaper distribution. There's a couple dates here. The next one is Wednesday, this Wednesday from 2 to 4. And then the next day, on Thursday, she'll be at CSA from 11:30 to 1:30. And then we are also attending the next day an outreach event at the elementary school called Dia del Niño. So there should be a lot of families there. We're going to have an activity at our table where people can make some fun buttons. And then the parents can get information about our program. So that's from 3 to 6:30. And then finally, on May 17th, we're having another outreach at the CSA, and we do distribute a lot of our Housing and Eviction Help Center flyers there, and then just provide general information about our programs. So that's how we get a lot of that one-to-one in-person outreach that we do.
And I'd also like to add that on Saturday, June 10th, we will be hosting our annual summer kickoff event with Chuck in Ringsdorf Park from 10 to 1. It should be quite fun. Just like last year, we're going to have a whole bunch of community organizations there. Each table will have activities for kids. We will have community members providing shaved ice and potentially tacos. We will see. And then it's a great event. The library has come out in the past for story time. Basically, it provides an opportunity for families to come out, learn about the resources available to them in the community while having a good time with kids. Last year it was great, and you are welcome to attend as well.
But please let us know in advance so we don't have quorum.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the committee members? I recognize Committee Member Ma.
So for the outreach events, do they come to you, or does the outreach specialist find these events and ask them to join?
Especially during COVID, we spent a lot of time cultivating relationships with all of the different organizations in Mountain View, very much in a two-way street sort of relationship. So we communicate with them whenever we're having an event and invite them to come to us, and then we definitely go to any outreach events that they're having. So we talk with CSA every other week. We have a standing meeting with them. So we're very aware of what each other are doing. And since we help a lot of the same families, the more contact we have with each other's clientele, the better, we think.
Thank you.
I now recognize Committee Member Cox.
Yeah, I just want to recognize Deborah Vasquez from Sunshine Garden Apartments. It's an apartment building in my neighborhood. It's a CSFRA controlled unit. And they hosted an Earth Day on this Saturday from 3 to 5 o'clock. And I found it an amazing event. I mean, she showed us how they were able to reduce their energy usage by 89%. And, this is by a combination of things like, installing new windows all through the complex, solar heating, variable pumps in the pool, better recycling practices. And it's just an amazing opportunity how, I remember when they said that they passed the CSFRA, one of the things was that, well, now you'll never see anybody invest in a rent control department again. And this is a clear indication where, the landlords and the tenants both benefited from an opportunity to have better places to live and better environment, and also lower cost for utilities. So I just want to say thank you to them for, leading in this area.
Thank you so much. Great. So I do have a comment. So can I not? Yeah. Okay. So I recognize myself. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but there we go. So I want to thank everybody, especially our staff, that have done a wonderful job. They definitely did a good job with me practicing. I made it failed on them. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It's mine. I want to thank all the committee members for being patient with me today. Obviously, you're all new to the committee, and I welcome you with huge, huge open arms. Thank you all. Any more questions from the committee members? Comments? No? Okay. Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 8:59 p.m. The next Rental Housing Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on Monday, May 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. And I will welcome our chair, Edie Keaton, on the next meeting.